Salam, peace be upon you. We have walked step by step across the silent ground, and every step has been a lock. Part 31 taught us humility. We cannot pick up Phi, we stand on it. We cannot grasp the ground of comparability directly. We can only point to its operational signatures. Part 32 gave that humility a spine. Public knowledge lives only inside finite, licensed windows with explicit boundaries. No window, no public truth. Now we arrive at the question that decides whether our windows become instruments or mirrors for our imagination. Because not every window shows truth. Some windows are too dim. Some windows are too shaky. Some windows are full of dust, fog, static, and bias. Some windows show a pattern to one eye and show nothing to another. Some windows show something today and show its opposite tomorrow. So the question is not only, do we have a window? The deeper question is, when does what we see through the window become trustworthy? When does pattern emerge from chaos? When does signal rise above noise? When does coincidence become evidence? When does maybe become public yes? This is part 33. The coherence licensing threshold. And its core claim is simple, but it is one of the most protective laws we can install in the entire program. A window becomes publicly readable only if its internal coherence surpasses a detectability threshold gamma. Below gamma, only noise. Above gamma, licensable pattern. Let me say it in the simplest words. Pattern must be strong enough to be distinguished from randomness. If it's too weak, it's just noise. If it's strong enough, it can become public truth. Gamma is the name we give to that line. Not because we worship symbols, but because we need a sharp marker in the mind. Gamma is the gate. Below it, you may have impressions, feelings, suspicions, private meanings, stories. Above it, you may have public facts. This threshold is where the program refuses to become superstition. Because superstition is what happens when humans certify patterns below gamma. And humans are built to do that. Our brains are hungry pattern machines. We see faces in clouds. We hear voices in wind. We feel meaning in coincidences. That is not stupidity. It is ancient survival. If you assume rustle in the grass might be a predator, you live longer than the one who demands proof. But that same reflex becomes dangerous when we try to build civilization-grade knowledge. In science, in justice, in medicine, in governance, and especially in cosmogenesis, the cost of false patterns is enormous. So part 33 is the discipline that says, maybe is allowed, but public truth must be earned. And it is earned only when coherence crosses gamma. Now we must make coherence feel like something you can touch. Imagine you are trying to read a sign at night across a road. You have a window. You are looking at this sign, at this distance, at this time. But the streetlight flickers, rain falls, your glasses are fogged, your hands are tired, cars splash water, the letters blur. You stare and you think it says hospital. Your friend stares and he thinks it says hostel. A third person stares and she thinks it says hotel. Who is right? The problem is not that you lack a window. You have a window. The problem is coherence. There is not enough stable signal to defeat the noise. In that condition, the honest sentence is not the sign says hospital. The honest sentence is the sign is unreadable under these conditions. That sentence is already the spirit of gamma. It acknowledges a limit not as failure, but as truth. A window exists, but it does not license a readable claim. So part 33 installs a second firewall after part 32. Part 32. No window, no public truth. Part 33. No coherence, no public truth. A window is necessary, but it is not sufficient. Now let's return to the factory beneath hell, because the factory teaches gamma in wool and finger pain. Early in the weaving, when only a few rows are done, the carpet looks like scattered colors. The knots are real, but the design is not yet visible. The apprentice stares and imagines a flower, a diamond, a border. Another apprentice stares and imagines something else. The same beginnings, different stories. Then the master weaver comes. He does not insult, he does not praise. He does not pretend certainty. He looks at the beginnings and says a sentence that contains an entire philosophy of knowledge. Not yet. Not wrong, not bad, not beautiful, not yet. Meaning, the pattern has not cohered enough to become publicly readable. The repetitions have not established themselves. The relationship between elements is still ambiguous. The carpet is still below gamma. Then rows are added, more knots, more repetition, more alignment, more consistency. And then something happens, a threshold crossing. Suddenly the design pops out. The Herati diamonds become visible. The border declares itself. The symmetry becomes checkable. What was random seeming becomes ordered. Not because the carpet became magical, but because coherence accumulated until it crossed the detectability threshold. Below gamma. Maybe it's Herati. Could be something else. I'm not sure. Above gamma. Yes, Herati. Now we can compare. Now we can audit. That is the moment when private impression becomes public fact. This is why gamma is not merely a statistical idea. It is a craft idea. Weavers know it. Doctors know it. Judges know it. Honest parents know it. Now watch carefully. The master weaver's not yet is not weakness. It is protection. Because if you certify a pattern too early, you build the rest of the carpet on a misread design. You commit to colors and motifs that later will reveal themselves as wrong. Early false certainty spreads like a stain. Gamma prevents that. It forces patience before certification. Now take the same idea to medicine, because medicine is where gamma saves lives. A doctor listens to a heartbeat. Lub-dub, lub-dub, lub-dub. Then she hears something odd. Lub-dub, lub-dub-dub, lub-dub. An extra beat. Once, it could be nothing. A random fluctuation, a twitch, an artifact, a moment of stress. Twice? Now she pays attention. 3 times in a row, pattern begins to appear. When the extra beat repeats with regularity, every third beat consistently, then the window crosses gamma. Below gamma, occasional irregularity. Above gamma, a coherent rhythm pattern. That crossing matters. Because the doctor does not build a diagnosis from one strange sound. She waits for coherence. She looks for repeatable structure that rises above the noise floor of normal variation. This is why medicine has diagnostic criteria. Not one symptom, a cluster, a pattern, a repeatable signature. Diagnostic criteria are gamma written into practice. They say, do not certify below threshold. And notice again, Gamma is not about perfection. Doctors act with uncertainty all the time, but they must have enough coherence to justify action. They must know whether they are hearing a true pattern or random flicker. Now let's go to the radio, because the radio makes gamma audible. Imagine an old radio. You turn it on. Static, hiss, crackle, randomness. You turn the dial slowly. More static. Then, faintly, a voice. Barely audible, mixed with noise. Is it really a broadcast? Or is it your mind turning noise into speech? So you hold the dial and listen. The voice comes again. Same tone, same rhythm, same pattern. Coherence accumulates. At some point, you cross a line where you no longer say maybe. You say, yes, that is a signal. That line is gamma. Below it, might be imagining it. Above it, clearly receiving a broadcast. And this is crucial. Gamma is not only about loudness, it is about pattern stability. A weak signal can be licensed if it repeats coherently enough. A loud signal is still worthless if it is chaotic. So gamma is about distinguishability from randomness. Now let's handle a confusion that destroys many discoveries before they are born. People think thresholds are subjective. One person sees the pattern earlier, another sees it later. This is partly true, but it misses the meaning of public coherence. Public coherence is not the moment one person feels convinced. Public coherence is the moment independent observers converge. If the signal is near threshold, one listener says, I hear it. Another says, I don't. That is below public threshold. But increase the signal just a little, just enough, and suddenly both agree. Yes, it's there. That convergence is the real meaning of gamma. Gamma is where private maybe becomes objective yes. That is why science does not rely on individual conviction. Science relies on replicable convergence across minds, tools, and times. And that is exactly what we mean by public. Now we must connect gamma to phi, because we are not doing generic philosophy. We are building a firewall-certified cosmogenesis. Phi is the permission for distinction, but distinction requires enough difference to be distinguishable. That enough is gamma. You can only speak publicly when the comparative structure produces coherent outcomes in a window. So gamma is not an added metaphysical idea. It is the operational gate that allows comparability to become readable rather than imagined. Now we say the firewall in one line, because a firewall must be remembered quickly. We do not certify patterns below gamma. Now let's state the prediction, because prediction is our spine. Prediction. All measurements will exhibit a signal-to-noise floor below which claims stop replicating. This is not a prediction about one lab or one era. It is a prediction about the structure of measurement itself. In microscopy, there are resolution limits below which structures become blur. In telescopes, there are magnitude limits below which stars disappear into background. In medical tests, there are sensitivity limits below which markers cannot be reliably detected. In psychology and social science, there are effect size limits below which findings fail replication. In physics, there are background limits and shot noise and systematic uncertainties that refuse to vanish. This is gamma appearing in different clothing everywhere. Below the floor, different observers get different results. The same observer gets different results on different days. The pattern dissolves. Above the floor, observers agree. Replications converge. The claim becomes stable enough to build upon. So our prediction is clean. If someone tries to build a science below gamma, the results will drift. They will reproduce only by accident. They will generate schools of interpretation rather than stable facts. And history confirms this pattern again and again. Areas that build themselves on marginal signals become fields of endless debate until coherence rises or the effect disappears. Now we state the falsification, because we must be fair to reality. Falsification generates stable public science from completely incoherent, unlicensed observations. Not from weak signals. Weak signals can be licensed with enough repetition and good methods. From completely incoherent observations. Pure noise. No pattern distinguishable from randomness. Produce a body of knowledge that is publicly accepted, repeatedly verified, predictive, and yet grounded in data that has no coherence above chance. If someone can do this, part 33 fails. But notice how strong this is. It would mean doctors diagnosing disease from random symptoms, radio operators decoding messages from pure static, weavers identifying patterns from completely random knots, physicists deriving laws from data that has no stable structure. In other words, it would mean building truth from patternlessness. If that exists, it would be a new kind of reality. So we keep the falsification open. We do not protect our idea with vagueness. We let reality have a chance to overturn the axiom. Now, I want to add one more story that makes gamma feel like society, not just measurement. Imagine a village well. One person gets sick. 2 people get sick. 10 people get sick. Is the well contaminated? One sick person proves nothing. People get sick for many reasons. So the village elders establish a threshold. If more than a certain percentage of well users show similar symptoms within a certain time window, we investigate the well. Why set the threshold? Because without gamma, the village collapses into paranoia. Every cough becomes a crisis. Every coincidence becomes a curse. Gamma protects the village from panic. But gamma also protects the village from denial. Because once the threshold is crossed, once coherence rises above chance, the village must act. Below gamma, maybe just bad luck. Above gamma, likely contamination. This is public health as coherence licensing. The elders are doing what science does. They draw windows, they watch patterns, they refuse to certify below threshold, and they act when coherence crosses gamma. Now return to the factory again, because the factory has another version of gamma that is brutally clear. Quality control. The carpet is inspected square by square, but the factory must decide how many errors are acceptable. If the standard is 0 errors, no handmade carpet will ever be certified. That would be unrealistic and dishonest. If the standard is any number of errors, quality becomes meaningless. So the factory sets a threshold, no more than a certain number of errors per square meter. Not because the number is holy, but because above that number, the pattern begins to break visibly and value collapses. Below threshold, the carpet coheres as a quality product. Above threshold, it fails to cohere as a coherent design. That is gamma in economics and perception. Now, here is an important nuance that makes this axiom adult rather than naive. Gamma varies by context. The threshold depends on what is at stake and what the cost of error is. In a murder trial, gamma is extremely high, beyond reasonable doubt, because the cost of false conviction is immense. In a civil dispute, gamma is lower. More likely than not, because the stakes are different. In medicine, gamma can be high because false positives and harmful treatments are costly. In early exploration science, gamma can be lower because you are searching for hints and deciding where to look next. But here is the key: gamma never disappears. It may shift, but it is always there. There is always some line below which claims cannot be publicly sustained. This is not a weakness of knowledge, it is the structure of public responsibility. Now let's name the enemy clearly, because part 33 is a shield against a specific human habit: pareidolia, the tendency to see patterns in randomness. Our brains are beautiful at it. We see constellations in stars that are not connected. We see faces in rock formations. We see intention in accidents. This habit can comfort us, but it can also destroy us when we confuse it for evidence. Gamma is the discipline that stands between pattern hunger and public truth. It says, maybe, but not yet certified. Wait for repetition.
Wait for coherence. Wait for other eyes to agree.
Without gamma, you get constant false alarms. You get conspiracy theories. You get sciences that cannot replicate. You get courts that convict on coincidence. You get medicine that harms. You get economies that chase noise. You get relationships destroyed by reading meaning into one ambiguous moment. With gamma, you build trust, because trust is not a feeling. Trust is a coherence across time. Now let's tie everything back to the fundamental program, so the listener holds the road behind us. Phi gives the permission for distinction, but the permission is not the same as the certified distinction. Part 32 gave us windows, the boundaries of public pointing. Part 33 gives us gamma, the threshold where pointing becomes readable rather than imagined. So now we have a clean licensing pipeline. Windowed locality makes claims finite and checkable. Coherence threshold makes claims stable and replicable.
No window, no public truth.
Window but incoherent, still no public truth. Window and coherent above gamma, now you have a licensable pattern. This is the shape of public knowledge. Now we stamp the listener carry, because it must land like a stone you can keep. Public truth needs coherence. Say it again. Public truth needs coherence. And now, with this lock sealed, we are ready for the next one. Because even when coherence rises above gamma, another fact remains. Phi has infinite descriptive depth. We said that in part 12. Infinite jet potential, bottomless depth. But we are finite beings. Finite eyes, finite memory, finite instruments, finite time. So the next question comes like a law. Even in a coherent window, how much can a finite observer extract? How many bits can you pull from an infinite sea? How many derivatives can you operationally read? How many facts can you certify before your access itself becomes the limit? This is part 34, the finite access principle. And this is why part 33 had to come first. Because without gamma, we would confuse our limitations with the world's noise. And without part 34, we would confuse the world's infinite depth with our finite reach. So we move forward with discipline. We do not pick up the ground. We point inside windows. We certify coherence above gamma. And now we accept the next structural truth that will keep the entire program honest. Infinite depth, finite reach. Salam. Peace be upon.